Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to the very first part of a new ongoing series I hope to do where I am reading the book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's by Dale Carnegie. It's a very good book. It's an older book, but I think everyone should read this. So my dad has read this book, and I know a couple people in my life have read this book. And it basically talks about, just the way that we think and the way other people think, and kind of how to use that in your everyday life to progress yourself and really, make friends and influence people like the title suggests. So part one of the book talks about fundamental techniques in handling people, and the first principle is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. I wrote about this on the blog, justonemoreday.info, but, I figured it would be nicer to kind of talk about it too. Once again, I apologize for the low quality 2009 budget production that I have running here. I don't have the best camera, it's just a webcam, but hopefully you guys can look past that and just kind of listen to what I have to say. So the book starts with a date of May 7th, 1931. I know, very, very old. It's a long time ago. And it talks about a manhunt that happened in New York City, and there's this guy named Two-Gun Crowley, maybe? And he was surrounded by a whole bunch of officers. He was in his girlfriend's or lover's apartment, and there's this big 1 hour gunfire session that goes off between them. New York claimed he was one of the most dangerous criminals ever alive. Finally he was captured, and his thought about that was very different. He thought he wasn't very dangerous. He said this quote: "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." That's weird, because how can someone who has killed someone and killed people think that about himself? Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one. That's a weird thought to have. The same can be said for Al Capone. Everyone knows Al Capone. I think that's one of the very first criminals I've heard of. When I was little, it's just always like Al Capone, the mobster. He didn't think that he was a bad person. Also the same can be said for many prisoners in our prison system today. Only a few of them actually think they're bad men and women. So if people like Al Capone and, Two-Gun Crowley, and people in prison think that they did nothing wrong, why would people that we come in contact with every day ever think that they're wrong? I'm sure many of you can relate to that, because, I'm sure we know a whole bunch of people who can never say that they're wrong, no matter what they do. They are never wrong. So John Wanamaker, in the book, says this. He says 99 times out of 100, people don't criticize themselves for anything. I'm sure there are a ton of people in your life who you can instantly think of when when I just said that, and I can think of a couple too. So also in the chapter, it talks about criticizing and how we're always so fast to criticize someone else. B.F. Skinner proved that animals, rewarded for good behavior will learn much more rapidly, and retain what they learn than an animal punished for bad behavior. I remember when we were training my dog, my little dog Daisy. You might have seen her in another article that I wrote over at the website. I wrote about her later on for another chapter in the book. When we first got her, we knew there was going to be accidents and mistakes, of course. So, every time she went to the bathroom on the floor, we'd just clean it up and then sit her in the potty pad. That way maybe she knows, oh, maybe she's supposed to go in here next time. So we'd sit her in there for maybe a minute, and then she'd just walk out. So then she kind of learned, oh, maybe I need to go over here. So then one time, finally, she actually made it into the potty pad. So then we're all super excited, super happy. We reward her, we give her a cookie, we give her a little treat. And then, something might click in her head, like, oh, if I went on the floor, I didn't get a cookie, but if I went here, I got a cookie. Over time, she started going more and more into the potty pad, and she'd always get a cookie, a cookie, a cookie. So I think it finally clicked to her that, oh, if I go in here, I get a cookie. And she still had a couple accidents here and there, but we'd kind of just not give her a cookie at all and just clean it up. Maybe give her a little look, because one, she knew that she did something wrong. You could always tell, when she went to the bathroom in a place she wasn't supposed to, because she'd come over to you and lay right by your legs and feel really bad. Back to B.F. Skinner, animals rewarded for good behavior will learn much more rapidly. It's the same in humans. So I'm sure as I said that, maybe you're thinking of a time you made a mistake, maybe at work, maybe at school, and that you were criticized for it. They instantly jumped to it and they weren't afraid to yell at you or tell you that you did something wrong, even though that you already knew you did something wrong. Kind of like me, when that happens, I'll try to justify my actions, and I'll resent them because I'm thinking in my head, I'm not wrong, I'm right. I did this because this happened or this happened. We really try to, rationalize the actions here, and then we just really think about it, and, that doesn't help at all. And, that's normal because it's human nature, that's the way we are kind of programmed to act. And there's, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the way we are programmed. And, and it's this resentment that we have towards others, that can demoralize employees, it can hurt family members and friends, and if anything, very rarely actually, it actually fixes the problem that has been condemned. So nothing gets solved here except people now have tension in between each other. Carnegie in the book talks about George B. Johnston. He's a safety coordinator for an engineering company. One of his many duties is to see that people wear their hard hats on the job. Of course, people have to wear hard hats to keep them safe. So he'd walk by every day and check, and of course, some people weren't wearing their hard hats. So of course, he'd, show his authority and be like, hey, you need to put these on. Like, I am higher than you. I'm a safety coordinator. If you don't put these on, we're going to have some problems. And, people would, put on their hats. I'm sure there's like, whatever dude, put on their hats, and, to his surprise, right when he left, they'd take them off again. Nothing got done. If anything, now they think badly of the safety coordinator because they think he's strutting his authority. So after George learned about this, that, they just took the hats off again, he realized, maybe this approach isn't the right way to go about it, because obviously it's not working. They'll put their hats on, when I get there, and then they'll take them off right when I leave. Next time when he came around, he saw that they didn't have their hats on, and he actually went up to them, and he said, the hats were uncomfortable, did they not fit? Kind of what was the reason why they weren't wearing the hats? Were they just doing it because they wanted to show, they didn't want to follow his rules? Or like I said, was it actually uncomfortable? Did they feel stupid in them? So he asked them, he kind of said, hey, what's the reason for not wearing these hats? So then instead of yelling, he didn't say, you need to wear these hats. He kind of just said in a calm voice that just a reminder that these hats are there for their protection. He's not making them wear them to say, oh, you're a construction worker, or to make you look stupid. He wants you to wear it because he cares about your safety, and he wants you to be safe. And so he suggested that it be worn at all times. And what was found was that more workers actually kept the hat on, and no one got upset. Because one, he wasn't saying he was higher up, and then he was actually kind of, talking to them and kind of just asking questions. And that kind of goes on to the next point of just watch what you say. So this next example talks about Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president of the United States. And Dale Carnegie wrote a lot about Abraham Lincoln. He researched him so much, and he probably knows more about his life than anyone in the entire world. This next story almost got him killed. So he not only criticized people, but he wrote, hate letters towards others and about others. And so he dropped these letters on public roads and country roads because he knew that they would be read and opened and seen by people. And so he finally wrote about someone named James Shields. He was a politician. And so James Shields heard about his letter that someone wrote about him, embarrassing him, and he felt publicly criticized. So he demanded that he find who wrote this letter. And finally it traced him back to Abraham Lincoln. So finally this guy knows that this Lincoln guy, teenager kind of, wrote about him like this. So what did he do? He challenged him to a duel. That's how they settled things, I guess, back then. You know, James Shield wanted to fight Lincoln to the death for honor. And to save his honor, Lincoln actually agreed to fight Shields. Luckily, the fight was interrupted and the thing was stopped. After learning that lesson that he almost could have fought to the death, Lincoln never wrote another mean thing about someone else ever again. What I take from this story is really to always watch what you say about someone else. Especially today, it's so easy with social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram even, to hate on someone. And I know I feel protected behind the screen because it's you're not talking to them directly, and so you don't really see the actions and the result of what you do. So it's very easy to hate on someone. So you always have to be careful, because you never know who could see it or what could happen, or it could even come back to bite you in the butt. And so Carnegie writes, he says, when dealing with people, let us remember we are not dealing with creatures of logic, we are dealing with creatures of emotion. Humans are emotional, We cry, we laugh, we get mad, we are super happy sometimes, we're all about emotion, our emotion changes from day to day, and we act on our emotions. A big thing in advertising is, play on someone's emotions. If you can make them sad, you could probably get them to, pay and buy your product. It's a huge thing. Marketers love to play with your emotions. I'm sure you've seen some of those animal shelter ads. They want to make you cry, and then they'll always say, if you want to help out, make sure to donate. And a lot of people actually do, because they feel like they're helping, because they see those animals and they get really sad. So always be careful to criticize, because any fool can criticize, condemn, or complain. It takes character and self-control to really be understanding and forgiving. And this next example that Carnegie talks about is this one really actually inspired me, and this is got a lot of respect for this guy. His name is Bob Hoover. He was a famous test pilot, and he was a frequent performer at air shows. I don't know what year, I'm sure it was a long time ago. So returning home from one of his shows from Los Angeles, 300 feet in the air, both of his engines stopped. Just all of a sudden, just stop. Luckily, he had the skills to safely land the plane and no one was hurt. But just as he thought, when he got to inspect the plane, the fuel tank was filled with jet fuel, rather than gasoline. So the fuel person, made a huge mistake. He accidentally put jet fuel in the tank. Right when he got to the airport, he asked to see the mechanic who serviced this plane that day. And I'm sure, people can expect that this Bob Hoover guy was going to rip him apart and, tell him, you almost got me killed and, I will kill you. Don't ever let that happen again. But he actually didn't. And the mechanic came with him with tears in his eyes. He felt so bad. He knew he messed up, and he knew that he almost cost the lives of some good people. So he's crying and, he feels bad. He thinks he's going to get, hit, or he's about to he's going to get it. He's about to be fired and everything. Did Hoover scold him? No, he did not. He actually put his arm around him and said, to show you that I'm very certain that you won't ever do that again, I want you to service my plane tomorrow. So instead of yelling at this guy and, really giving it to him, he actually trusted him again, said, like I said, to show you that I'm sure you'll never do this again, I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow. I'm sure that mechanic, never made another mistake like that in his life, because he knew that, Bob Hoover trusted him enough to never do that again. And, I'm sure, like I said, he never did that again. And, this reminds me of a story of when I used to work at Arby's. My Arby's was very strict on drive-thru. They wanted you out of our window in 30 seconds, paid for, drinks in the hand, food in the hand, you're driving off, all under like 30 seconds. It's very easy to make mistakes. I'm sure people are thinking of times when they first started a job. You make mistakes. Like, it happens, and you can't avoid it. Our manager there, she took the mistakes very personally. She cared about the drive-thru time, and every little mistake that I made, she'd tell me, and she'd say, you can't do that again. You gotta go faster. You gotta go faster. So, of course, I'm just getting more nervous, and I'm making more mistakes. And finally, after a couple hours, she just sent me home because apparently I was making too many little mistakes here and there. Walking out, I was embarrassed. I was upset, as one would imagine. I tried to justify, what I could have been doing better, and, I was mad at the manager. I didn't show it, but, I'm thinking, I'm mad, so every time I had to work with them again, I'd fear that I'd make a mistake, or if I made a little mistake, she might see it. So, of course, I'm just trying not to make a mistake, so I'm thinking about that. Of course, you make more mistakes when you try not to make mistakes, and it's just a vicious cycle that always happens, and nothing ever really got fixed. So as Carnegie writes, as the last sentence in the chapter, and I'm going to read it here, he says, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all, and those can apply to each story that we talked about, especially the Bob Hoover one. He tried to understand where the mechanic was coming from. Maybe he was in a rush that day, and I'm sure the mechanic didn't have the intention to kill him and put jet fuel in his tank. Just like me at Arby's, I'm not trying to make mistakes, but sometimes if you do something wrong, people will just point it out to you. And it also could be said about the hard hat workers. The safety advisor started with yelling at them and showing his authority, but then he said, okay, let's try to understand why we're not wearing the hats. If I was in their shoes, why would I not be wearing this? Is it uncomfortable? Here I am out in the hot sun every day. Maybe the hat, when I sweat, it's itchy. So he wanted to ask and actually really try to understand what was wrong. And of course he saw very different results instead of when he was yelling at them. So that is the first chapter, or the first section really, of the first part of the book that says, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Every week I talk about these. I am, I think, 4 or 5 sections in of the book, so if you want to read ahead and know what I'm going to be talking about next week, make sure to do that. But thank you guys so much for listening and watching and hearing my thoughts about the book and everything. You guys are amazing. Once again, I apologize for this, not the best setup here. It's just me and a webcam and a microphone, lit by my computer screen, just talking to you guys. As always, check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, my main place, the website, www.justonemoreday.info. That's where I'm sharing all my thoughts every Thursday, and every other day here and there. We just hit, at the time of recording this, 4,600 total views on the blog. Thank you so much for that. That means a lot to me. It really does. 4,600 views in, a little under 2 months. We're doing really good. So thank you so much for that. So I won't keep you any longer. Thank you so much once again, and I will see you next week, guys.